Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Thrive in China Roundtable, where we are going into the details of social insurance obligations in China. Why should you be concerned by social insurances in China? Well, China has several forms of social insurance violations, and you obviously violate the law if you don't pay any social insurance at all. But violations by foreign employers in China that I most commonly seen are much more subtle and complicated than that. We see violations when employers fail to pay social insurance for the entire term of employment. This violation often happens when the employer thinks it need not pay social insurance during the employee's probation period. We also see, hold on, I'm just admitting somebody into the group. We also see violations involving employers failing to pay all 5 types of social insurance. And with rising wages in China, we have lately been seeing a rash of employer problems arising from paying social insurance based on a lower salary than is actually paid, either because the employer failed to update the salary amount or because it intentionally reported a lower salary so as to reduce the employer contribution. These are the sorts of things that we do when we do our internal audits within organizations, is to really understand what is happening within the company. And these sort of signs are triggered when internal audits are done. Now, employees may consent to the employer claiming a lower salary, but that is irrelevant. Once caught or even once reported by the employee who consented, you are taken to court and you will be required to backtrack and pay for all of the social insurance that was not declared. And that can obviously risk things, right? So it is really, really important that you remain in compliance in China, that you do things above board. And remember, we are not here to evade the law, to evade paying social insurance rates. We are here to treat our employees fairly and squarely and make sure that we are following all of the legal contributions. Now, what I want to highlight also is that even when an employee comes up with a suggestion to lower the cost for the company, if it is an illegal suggestion, meaning you shouldn't be doing it at all, be wary of that, because this can totally backtrack on you in the future if you decide to terminate with that employee in any such way. So make sure that you are doing things accordingly. Now, I have reflected back on the social insurance reform, which took place in 2019. Now, why am I doing that? It's because people tend to Google things over a period of time. And I just want to make sure that you are Googling the right stuff and you are reading about the right stuff. Okay. So the social insurance reform as of Jan 1, 2019 is the most current social insurance scheme. Social insurance contributions are now levied by tax bureaus. Previously, they were levied by the Labor Bureau, but now they are levied by the Tax Bureau, which means that not only does the tax handle your tax declarations, your corporate income tax, individual income tax, value-added tax, consumption tax, stamp duty tax, etc., but they are also taking care of the social insurance contributions. This is all done and paid for on behalf of the local tax bureaus. Something that a lot of you might not be aware about, but when this reform came into place, and now it's become a standard, when you incorporate a company in China and you open up your bank accounts, there must be a tripartite agreement between the tax bureau, the bank, and the company to be able, so that the tax bureau has the ability to automatically deduct social insurance contributions, housing fund contributions, as well as tax payments automatically from your bank account. Okay. Check that out, because now every single company in China is required to be doing that. And that was probably one of the biggest changes to the system in 2019, was really this change from moving from the Labor Bureau to the Tax Bureau. Okay. Now, under this reform, I say the new rule, it's not the new rule, it's as of 2019. So we're 3 years into this, almost 4 years into this. The tax bureau is required to verify the payroll declaration, which encompasses both the income tax declaration, where they act as a withholding agent on a month-to-month basis until the annual income tax filing is done at the end of the year, and compare that to the social insurance contributions and as well as housing fund contributions that are being made. They are checking the system throughout, okay? Now, there was further items that were in the form was a countrywide reduction in company contributions to urban workers' pension funds, which was unified at 16%. There was a progressive cut in premium rates for unemployment and work-related injury insurance. That was extended due to COVID to April 30th, 2020, and it's still been extended due to the current zero COVID policies. And there was also an adjustment to the Social Security base policy as well at that time. In addition, there was a unification of basic aged care insurance payments for employees by 2020, increase of pension fund ratios by 3.5%. So there was a bunch of different things basically that you can see that was happening, okay, in terms of the reforms. Today, I want to crack down on what is actually social insurance in China, okay? What does it encompass? Who pays what? And what are the associated rates, okay? Now, having your own business in China does not automatically entitle you to hire employees. There are a set of rules and laws that every employer in China has to abide by while considering the recruitment of local as well as foreign employees. And if you hire employees for your company in China, certain responsibilities must be undertaken and confirmed for employee welfare. China's social security system or scheme consists of 5 mandatory social insurance items: pension fund, work injury insurance, medical insurance, maternity insurance, and unemployment insurance. Then separate from that, there is a housing fund, which is only applicable to Chinese employees. All of the other 5 social insurance items are for foreigners as well as locals, okay? What makes payroll in China quite complex is that the contribution rates for social insurance and housing fund are updated every single year. Usually it's in the months between June, July, and August. And they change according to city jurisdiction. So the contribution rates in Shanghai are different compared to the contribution rates in Beijing, which is different compared to the contribution rates in Guangzhou. Now, the contribution rates really comes down to the standard of living in that city. So ultimately, to simplify, you've got to take it in your mind. Shanghai has the highest standard of living in China. It will have the highest social insurance contribution rates compared to any other city in China. Now, the social contribution is mandatory for Chinese employees and their employers, as well as foreigners employed in China. It will be considered illegal for a company that does not contribute any social insurance or housing fund for its employees in China. Hence, it is really, really important that you get advice around that you understand what are the mandatory benefits, and that you understand also what are the supplemental benefits that you could add in case that comes up in recruitment conversations with candidates. Now, although both employee and employers make contributions towards the social insurance funds in China, it is generally the case that the employer is responsible for each month for withholding the contribution of the employee from the gross salary, making the employee's contribution together with that of the employer, okay? So from an actual practical standpoint, month to month, the employer is making the salary breakdown, and they are withholding the income tax. They're also withholding the social insurance contribution by the employee, and making those payments themselves. Okay. When hiring new staff members, employers need to register them with the local social insurance bureau and housing fund bureau. The company has to have an account with those bureaus. The payments are done with the tax bureau, but they need to be registered with those social insurance bureaus and housing fund bureaus under the company name. And as each city or region regulates its own social insurance scheme, the procedures vary from city to city and change rapidly. So you've really got to understand in your own city what it means to pay the social insurance, to what accounts, how does the tax bureau get involved, etc. So let's go through each of the social insurances so you also have an understanding of what they mean. So let's start off with pension. Now, an individual can receive a pension based on the amount accumulated in his or her individual fund after retirement. In general, individuals need to pay at least 15 years of contributions prior to receiving a pension in China. Some industries have different retirement ages, but mainly men are 55 years old, women are 50 years old for blue collar workers, factory workers. And for white collar, it's men are 60 years old and women are 55 years old. The amount of retirement benefits depends on local regulations. And due to China's population problems, these ages may soon change as well, meaning that it could very well go that for white collar, it's 65 for men and 60 for women. The next is the medical insurance. Now, in the event of illness or non-occupational injury, the employee can have part of the treatment costs covered by medical insurance. The medical insurance in China is required to be paid by both the employer as well as the employee on a monthly basis, same as the pension fund. The medical insurance will reimburse medical expenses to designated hospitals for treatment. The patient will no longer need to pay for the treatment in advance and then wait for compensation. It's automatically deducted as they are getting the treatment in the hospital. It is very, very important to realize that when you are on this medical insurance scheme, it is only for government-supported hospitals and clinics. This does not include foreign clinics or international clinics. So it is important to think for senior managers or even for foreign expat employees to have an additional medical insurance to support their needs in China. I have only been on, I think, 2 occasions to a public hospital. I can't say it was a good or bad experience. It's just I don't have Chinese vocabulary to explain my illnesses. I therefore prefer to go to a foreign doctor who is working at an international clinic to be able to cater to my needs. It is purely a language component. Okay, I have actually found service to be better at public hospitals than foreign clinics. And in some instances, I have also found doctors to be better at public hospitals than foreign clinics, which is why those 2 times I did go to a public hospital because I wasn't happy with the treatment I was getting at the foreign clinic. Unemployment insurance. Now, in the event of redundancy, i.e. you've been terminated, the employee can claim unemployment benefits for a maximum of 24 months. Employers must contribute to the unemployment insurance fund in China. However, only employees in certain jurisdictions are required to increase their monthly contributions. And by jurisdictions, I mean the cities within China. Under normal circumstances, unemployed individuals have the right to receive unemployment benefits for up to 12 to 24 months, depending on the actual situation, if they make more than 12 months of donations into the account. What I'm trying to get at here, a lot with the terminology I'm using, is that you will find that a lot of local employees never want to have a break in their social insurance contribution because it does affect their pension in the future. It does affect their unemployment insurance. It does affect a lot of the insurances. So you will find that at certain points, individuals will be like, look, you know, your company might not be set up yet, but I can't risk having my social insurance contributions not being met. I need to solve this. So maybe I'll stay with my current employer and then switch to you when you are ready to hire me. So you've got to really, and this is why also a lot of employees go to employer record services or PEO services, so that there's that interim company that can offer this service of having continuous social insurance contributions. The next one is the work-related injury insurance. Now, the work-related injury fund in China covers the cost of treatment should an occupational injury or an illness occur on the premises of the company or in the time allocated for working, okay? In addition, employees working under certain weather conditions will also receive certain allowances. For example, in heat waves, if you are required to work on a production site or on a construction site, and the weather is over 50 degrees, you will be given allowances as well through this type of insurance. Only employers are required to pay work-related injury insurance on a monthly basis. In some jurisdictions, again, the monthly amount required will vary according to the industry and the sector. So please do keep that in mind. Maternity insurance is something that is paid not only to women, but also to men. And during maternity leave or even paternity leave, the employee receives reimbursement from the insurance. Only employers, again, need to pay maternity insurance in China every single month. Yeah, you get basically funding through the family planning policy, and obviously during your pregnancy and thereafter. So those are the 5 mandatory social insurance components. Now I want to talk a little bit about the add-ons. So under the social insurance, you can add on a commercial or supplemental health insurance. Commercial insurance refers to the form of insurance for the purpose of making profits through the operation of insurance contracts, which are operated by specialized insurance companies. So, for example, are you going to buy a supplemental health insurance or medical insurance for your foreign employees, right? The commercial insurance relationship is a contractual relationship voluntarily signed by the parties. The insurer pays insurance premiums based on the contract and what is included in that contract. The insurance company is liable for compensating insurance premiums according to the contract agreed on, and it can be for accidents like property damage or caused by its occurrence, or if your employees start getting cancer, very severe illnesses, or they've also reached a certain age, i.e. they're in their 50s, then you would have these insurance premiums. I want to make sure that people understand that this is all voluntary. It is not a mandatory add-on. It's completely up to you. Now, housing fund. So housing fund is something which people have to understand is a insurance that is paid to help employees, mainland Chinese employees, purchase property. The rate varies from city to city. It is paid on a monthly basis, both by the employer as well as by the employee. You can pay a supplemental housing fund, which is an additional amount of funds provided to the employees after they have paid up the statutory housing fund. One thing I want to highlight about the supplemental housing fund is the fact that you cannot just pay it to one employee, you have to pay it to your team of employees. It is not something that is mandatory, so you have to make a decision whether you're going to be offering this supplemental housing fund or not. The dilemma comes when you are recruiting people and one employee gets this supplemental housing fund from their previous employer, another employee does not. You have to make a decision, are you offering it to everybody or nobody? Okay, and it should be something that's discussed in the recruitment process. So make sure that you know what you're contributing during the recruitment phase, and that you can have these discussions before onboarding people. All right, Employer obligations. Now, one thing to be noted is that the employer's obligation to make adequate and timely contributions cannot be alleviated or exempted. Okay. You cannot say to your employee, actually, I don't have the funding right now. I'm going to pay your October social insurance in December. No, it is a fixed monthly contribution. And due to these tripartite agreements that exist between tax bureaus, social insurance bureaus, and your company, it is actually automatically deducted now by the tax bureaus. Okay. So I want people to be aware of this. And if you are in violation of, I don't know, not having enough cash in your bank account so that there's not enough that the tax bureau can deduct, you could be put on the blacklist by the HR bureau or the tax bureau. I will be right back, everybody. Just give me 1 second. Apologies, everybody. That was the post. So I want people to be aware that, you don't want to, this is something that happened during the Shanghai lockdowns in April, May, and June. It was basically a survival of cash flow. Do we have enough cash to pay salaries? And there was no revenue coming in for a lot of our clients. There were exceptions being made in those types of circumstances where you might not have enough cash sitting in your bank account because of these lockdowns, because of not having oversight over your bank account, because you weren't earning any revenue due to the fact that there was simply no logistical supply chain whatsoever. But in normal circumstances, try to make sure that you always have at least 3 to 5 months worth of expense cash available so that deductions can be made automatically by the tax bureau. Otherwise, you could run into getting blacklisted, having reputational damage, not being able to negotiate tax declarations with your tax officer because you've got a blacklist for the HR side of things. So be aware of that, be wary of that, etc. In terms of the calculation of social insurance, now to correctly calculate the monthly social insurance contribution for both the 5 mandatory items plus the housing fund, I'm not going into supplemental items. It is important for the employers to understand the basic rules on deciding the contribution base figure. Firstly, rather than the actual payment that employees get for each month, the Social Security contribution base is a figure that is determined by the employee's average income in the previous year. What does all this mean? Okay, so I'm going to take Shanghai as an example. Now, as I mentioned, social insurance contribution rates and the base is changed every single year in the period of between June, July, and August. When you hit the base level salary, which in Shanghai now, I believe is at around 28,000 RMB per month. If a person is earning 28,000 RMB or more, their social contribution and housing fund contribution is capped at the base of the 28,000. So if you have somebody earning 54,000 RMB per month, it is capped at that 28,000 RMB base. Now, every June, let me backtrack. If you have a brand new employee coming into the company, they will follow your company's history and trajectory. So if your company has 2 headcount as a history, and now you've added this 3rd headcount for the fiscal year that you are in, this individual will just follow the base norms. But in the following year, the Social Security base figure is based not only on the inflation of the city that you're living in, but it is also based on the historical average income of each of your employees. So if that employee worked for only 2 months in 2022, that is the historical data, and the average will be used for those 2 months when you look at the new base figures in June, July, August of next year. Now, this gets a bit into a matrix system calculation. it does get a little bit complex. So what I want to recommend to everybody is that prior to recruiting somebody, make sure you go through a salary simulation so that you have a complete breakdown of this person's salary, what their monthly gross is, what is the base contribution, what is the employer contribution for the social insurance and housing fund, employee contribution for the social insurance and housing fund, and then looking at the net salary, income tax liabilities, and the total payable for you as a company. It is really, really important to do these simulations. And then based on my last week's presentation, realize that these simulations will not be the same month to month because the income tax is accumulated from month to month because it's an annual declaration that is done, but you withhold the income tax. So it's not always, the simulation won't be perfect, but you're looking at a plus minus of a couple hundred RMB from month to month. It's not huge, okay? Now, the biggest question that I get is around foreigners. Now, as of 2011, foreign employees working in China have been required to participate in China's social insurance scheme, okay? However, since Social Security is managed at the regional level, a range of inconsistencies exist. For example, cities such as Beijing, Nanjing, Tianjin, Shenzhen, they treat foreign employees the same way as domestic employees, meaning their social insurance contributions are compulsory and mandatory. On the other hand, Shanghai does not currently require, and we're talking about now 11 years down the line, still does not require foreign employees to contribute towards the social insurance. In Dalian, foreign employees are only required to pay pension and medical insurance and none of the other mandatory insurances. So I want people to also realize that when you are seconding or you have a team of foreigners that are on the ground, in Shanghai, it is not mandatory to pay it, but you can if you want. If your company's internal policy is that we want everything to be unified, then you can also say, okay, in Shanghai, I will pay social insurance and social insurance contributions, not just for my mainland Chinese employees, but I will do it also for my foreign employees, even though it's not mandatory. For smaller organizations, I would say, you know what, let's save cost, let's focus on that. But it really comes down to the size of your business, how you want to develop your internal policies. It's totally up to you, okay? Now, foreign employees are also eligible for social insurance exemptions if they come from countries that have social insurance exemption agreements with China. To date, 12 countries have reached such agreements with China. It's been Germany, South Korea, Denmark, Canada, Finland, Switzerland, Netherlands, Spain, Luxembourg, Japan, France, Serbia. There are a bunch more that are still in discussion, but obviously with COVID and whatnot, and a lot of expatriates also leaving, this has kind of been put on a hold. Now, the exemption scope and qualifications will really vary from each jurisdiction's agreement. And the local social insurance bureaus may have also different policies towards the implementation of those exemptions. So again, it's really important wherever your company is based to discuss with those local bureaus how it could actually impact your employees and whether you could apply for those exemptions. Now, a question that I get often is that, oh, this social insurance is such a pain. It's such a burden for us. It's such a cost for us. Ultimately, we always need to calculate like 45 to 50% on top of the gross salary as a rule of thumb and calculation. This is ridiculous. Look, social insurance and housing fund, pension is provided to you anywhere in the world. Okay, even in Hong Kong, you get the mandatory provident fund, which is a pension scheme that is set up for people for retirement. You are paying to these employees something that is important in terms of health, medical, pension, and very simply buying even property, right? Housing. So is it a burden? Yes, it is, but it's a burden you have everywhere around the world. Is it a little bit more expensive in China than other places? Yes, it is. Absolutely. But is it a necessity? Yes, it is a necessity. The question, though, is, can we evade or create loopholes in the system to reduce the burden? This is where you get into a tricky situation, because of course you can. Like I said in my intro, you can do all sorts of things, even with the agreement of your employees. But if you terminate these employees and you haven't followed the law to the T, those employees will have leverage over you to go then to the Labor Arbitration Committee and file complaint against you. And you will have no choice but to backtrack what is owed. So I want people to understand that even if they want to reduce certain things, that they really have to be careful about this, okay? I always say there are two bureaus in China not to mess around with. One is the Tax Bureau and one is the Labor Bureau. You don't want those two bureaus coming into your life and doing HR audits or doing tax audits. It distracts you from the core function of what your company should be doing. So although ultimately you think you're trying to save costs, this could completely backfire, where you not only have to backtrack costs, but you might even have penalties raised above you. And then you even have a red flag against your company name with both the Labor Bureau and Tax Bureau, who will constantly keep an eye on you. So be very, very careful on that point. Tips for employers regarding social insurance in China. Now, employers that pay the minimum social insurance contributions need to be careful with the calculations, because tax bureaus will be able to spot any short payments. And remember that they are doing the tracking between income tax payments and social insurance payments and looking at the payroll breakdowns and sheets. So they are doing the cross work to make sure it all makes sense and is all correct. Employers that have not treated social insurance contribution for dispatched employees or low-cost workers seriously need to review their practices immediately, because the Tax Bureau will inspect all salary-related information, personal data, social insurance information with the company's tax information, right? It's all going to be linked and unified. In addition to that, let me provide you here with a case study. We had a client that had 5 QC staff based in China and under a rep office. And they were doing, or let me put it this way, let's say Germany, which was the head office, was oblivious. They thought that they were in complete compliance, and they entrusted the local managing director that this guy was supporting the business, right? But obviously for this individual, because of KPIs that were set and how they were set and bonus calculations and all of that, his objective was to lower cost as much as possible. And as such, reduced each of the employees' base salaries so that he paid less social insurances on their behalf. Now, sometimes when you pay less of the social insurance, you don't get all of the medical coverage, because you are no longer considered a white-collar worker. You're considered very much a blue-collar worker. In one instance, one of the employees broke his leg, did not get the full coverage that was necessary. And on a site visit from the German employees, they noticed that the guy was going around with an envelope, or an envelope was going around collecting cash to support this individual to pay for his medical costs and expenses. When they started questioning, delving it with the MD, and then finally they decided to do an internal audit, they discovered that costs have been reduced and things have been done in an inappropriate way in many areas of the business. It is always clever to do these types of internal audits, HR audits, whatever you want to call them, depending on the divisions you want inspected, to make sure you are doing things correctly. Another area to look at is employers need to register and pay social insurance for employees in company registered cities, because the Tax Bureau will identify gray practices if you do it elsewhere. Now, I just wrote an article on this, and this is really a very big point. If you have your entity established in Shanghai and you've started up your business hiring Shanghai-based residents, you are fine. It means that these residents in Shanghai are following the Shanghai social insurance and housing fund rates, and everything is being paid in Shanghai. If now for your company's growth, you want to hire one person that is based in Shenzhen, actually, this employee in Shenzhen will be employed by a Shanghai company and needs to therefore follow the Shanghai social insurance rates and housing fund rates. Why does this become complex? One, because every single city has different rates. So actually, you could be paying less if you had an entity in Shenzhen for this one Shenzhen employee. But it even gets more complex when the Shenzhen employee starts buying property in Shenzhen and wants to have the housing fund contributions paid into the Shenzhen Social Security Bureau so that they can continue to pay for the mortgage of their house. So this is where it gets tricky, because a Shanghai company cannot open social insurance and housing fund accounts in any other city except of where they're based, unless they open up a branch office in that city. So unless you open up a branch office in Shenzhen, can that branch office then open up the local social insurance and housing fund rates? But then the question is, from a strategical standpoint, why would you open up a branch office for just one employee in Shenzhen just to cater to that? So again, this comes really into question when you are recruiting people and they are not based in the city of your company. How are you going to handle their social insurance and housing fund calculations? Where do they want that to be paid? How does it affect them? Other questions to ask would be things like, do you get supplemental housing because we have a policy where we don't pay it? You may have to then renegotiate salary levels, etc. Employers also need to treat the new, well, it's not the new collection because it's been happening for 4 years now, but they have to treat the fact that the tax bureau is in charge of social insurance payments. And because they are in charge, the system is much more efficient in terms of making sure that it's paid on time and paid in correct amounts. Now, as of January 1st, 2019, the penalties for underpayment, for late payment, for non-compliance have increased tremendously because it is all being done through the tax bureaus. So again, this is a huge warning for people that they have to think, if they don't do things correctly and they get caught, the penalties will be high, not just from a financial perspective, but also from an image perspective. Okay. So that's the end of today's presentation. If you guys have any questions, those that are watching live, please put them into the chat box. I hope that the information was comprehensive and helped tremendously. I always love to hear what people's biggest takeaways have been from these sessions. But also if you've got any questions, ask away. That's what I'm here for. So type away in the chat box and I'll get that once I finish the next slides. For those of you that are interested to learn about what Woodburn does, we are a corporate services firm offering all types of administrative functions for your company in China. So everything from incorporation to the accounting, tax, payroll, social insurance or salary simulations, etc., we can assist with. So if you've got any questions about our services or you would like to just set up a one-to-one to discuss, please don't hesitate to do that. Also, if you're just on a separate note wanting to get advice about your China strategy and how to employ talent, email me, Kristina@woodburnglobal.com, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about your needs in China and how we could support you with them. Please do keep in mind that we have more topics related around HR. So next week, we're going to be talking about the top 20 tips to understand China's business culture. We're going to be then talking about low-cost training for individuals within Chinese companies, how to find the right people for your organization in China, And then before the Christmas break, we're going to be talking about individual and corporate risks and precautions, and how to avoid fraud in China as well. I hope you've been enjoying our roundtable sessions. I will be providing a link to all of the past recordings from 2022. So if you want to backtrack and look at any of those, you will have access to them as being part of the Thrive in China community. No questions have popped in thus far, so I want to thank everybody for joining me. And for those that are watching this on record, again, don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any questions. Have a fantastic day, take care, and goodbye.